12 years earlier. She was already dressed when he reached for her in his sleep. His hand crossed the empty space beside him, searched briefly, the unconscious reach of someone whose body had spent 8 months learning that she was there, and then settled. He did not wake. He simply exhaled, slow and complete, and pulled the sheet closer and slept on. Rowan stood at the foot of the bed and looked at him for 10 seconds. She had given herself exactly 10, not 9, not 12, 10. Because 10 was survivable and 11 was not, and she had learned, in the particular brutal way you learn things that cost everything, that the difference between surviving something and not surviving it is almost always a single decision about how long you allow yourself to feel it. She turned away from him, walked to the door, did not look back. Outside, in the Highland dark, she made one phone call, 30 seconds, a number she had carried for 8 years in the lining of a coat pocket, folded so many times the crease had gone white. She had prayed, in the vague and private way of people who do not pray often, that she would never use it. A woman answered, old voice, unhurried, the voice of someone who had been receiving calls like this for a very long time and found nothing in them surprising anymore. I need the bond suppressed, Rowan said, from his side. I need it to feel like grief, the woman said. A pause. One breath. Yes. Come to me before dawn. She got in the car. She drove. She did not look in the rearview mirror. In the Highland estate behind her, the Alpha King slept for 2 more hours. When he woke, his hand found the empty space beside him again. This time, it stayed there. And the bond, which had been warm and constant in his chest for 8 months, the specific living warmth of something that knows it is not alone, went between one breath and the next, very quiet. He sat up in the dark. He pressed his hand flat against his own chest. He said her name once, to the empty room. No answer, just the bond, like a candle in a very large room, still lit, but barely. The doors of the Dravepack court had not been opened by a child in living memory. They were opened by ceremony, by war council, by the formal procession of ranked pack members on days of reckoning and declaration. They were opened by power, always by power, the kind that had earned its right to cross that threshold and knew it without needing to announce it. The stone arch above them was carved with the names of every alpha who had held this territory since the founding, and those names alone were enough to make grown wolves lower their eyes when they passed beneath. None of that stopped Emric. He was 12 years old. He was wearing a navy jacket with a fraying left cuff because his mother hadn't yet had time to mend it, and his dark hair was doing something complicated in the pre-dawn wind off the Highland hills. And he walked through those doors the way you walk through a door you have been standing outside of your entire life, not with arrogance, not with performance, with the particular bone-deep certainty of someone who has already decided, who decided, in fact, 3 weeks ago, lying in the dark of a palace room his mother didn't yet know was waiting for them, that this was what he was going to do. He had simply been waiting for the right moment. The right moment turned out to be 4 a.m, when his mother's breathing down the corridor had finally, after an hour of careful listening, shifted into the deep, unmistakable rhythm of actual sleep. He had not taken a bus. He had walked through the palace grounds in the pre-dawn dark, alone, with his territory chart in his jacket pocket and his father's power rising warm around his hands, and 200 yards of quiet Highland morning between him and the court doors. He had not been as alone as he believed, but he didn't know that yet. 200 pack members went silent as he walked the full length of the court floor, unhurried, spine straight, gold light building around his hands the way it always built when he was moving towards something that mattered. He stopped in front of the Alpha King, looked up. The Alpha King looked down, and in the packed, breathless silence of the court, something moved through Cassian Drave's face, through the composed, controlled mask of the most powerful alpha in 3 territories, like a fault line shifting, slow, irreversible. The expression of a man who has been certain of something for 12 years and has just, without warning, been shown that he was wrong. The boy said, "My mother told me not to come here yet." A pause. Not nervous, not performative, just honest. "I came anyway. I think you should know who I am." The gold light blazed from his hands. Royal alpha gold, unmistakable, enormous, flooding the cold stone chamber like sunrise forcing itself through a window that had been shut too long. And Cassian Drave, Alpha King of the Northern Vael Pack, said nothing, because there was nothing to say, because the boy standing in front of him had his own jawline and his own eyes and his own power, singing in his hands like something that had always been waiting to come home. And the only thing left to do was reckon with what that meant and everything that had led to it. This is the story of everything that made that moment possible. The courage of a mother who chose silence to protect her son. The patience of a king who kept a door open without knowing why. And the conviction of a boy who walked through it alone because he understood better than either of them that it was time. Stay close, because this one will ask everything of you and give every last piece of it back. Chapter 1. There is a particular kind of grief that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with the ceremony that loss is supposed to carry. The weeping, the visible unraveling that tells people around you something inside has broken and needs tending. It arrives quietly, the way tide comes in on a gray morning, incrementally, without drama, until one day you look up and everything recognizable has been submerged, and the only thing left above the waterline is function, the muscle memory of a life, running on without the person who used to live it fully. Rowan Vael had been living inside that grief for 12 years. Most days she kept it below the surface where it belonged. Most days it stayed there without being asked twice. The town was called Seabridge, a working coastal settlement on the northern Oregon coast, the kind of place that smelled permanently of salt and engine oil and the cold particular to water that has traveled a long way to get here. 2 docks, a fish processing warehouse, a hardware store, a bakery that opened at 5 in the morning and closed by noon, and on the south dock, a small boat repair workshop that Rowan had bought with 3 years of careful saving and operated under the name R. Vael, 1 letter different from her real name, close enough to feel like hers, far enough to be someone else's on paper. She was good with her hands, the kind of practical patient intelligence that looks at something broken and understands intuitively what it needs and in what order, which applied equally well to the fiberglass hulls she patched, the outboard engines she rebuilt, and the people who came to her dock with something that needed fixing and stayed longer than the job required. There was something in the way she listened that made them feel, without being able to explain why, less alone. She had learned to be that kind of person deliberately. Once, a long time ago, she'd been someone who let people see the weight she was carrying too. She had learned, at a cost she didn't allow herself to calculate directly, that this was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had been Rowan Vael of Seabridge for 11 of the 12 years she had been officially dead. The first year had been somewhere else entirely. A forgettable inland town, a rented room above a laundromat, a pregnancy she navigated alone with the calm, focused determination of someone who has decided that falling apart is not an option and means it down to the marrow. She had registered the birth in a county 3 hours north under paperwork that matched no record anyone would think to search, and she had held her son for the first time in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and winter rain and said very quietly to no one but him, We are going to be fine. I promise you, I am going to make us fine. She had kept that promise every single day for 12 years in ways that received no applause and left no visible monument. She was proud of that in the bone-deep, unglamorous way you're proud of things that cost everything and ask you to keep the receipt to yourself. Emric was 12 now. He was, and Rowan thought this with the helpless, specific clarity of a mother who has watched her child become a person and found the result genuinely astonishing, extraordinary. Not because she was his mother, though she was, because Emric carried himself with a quality she had no better word for than gravity, not heaviness, not seriousness for its own sake, something more like the quality of a body that knows its own mass and has made its peace with it. He moved at his own pace, thought at his own pace, arrived at conclusions that were reliably and disconcertingly correct. He collected navigational charts, not tourist maps, proper maritime surveys, topographical overlays, coastal elevation studies. One full wall of his bedroom was covered in an overlapping patchwork of them, and he could tell you from memory the depth of any inlet on the Oregon coast within a reasonable margin. He read constantly and eclectically: geology, natural history, pack history, accessed through carefully chosen library databases, anything about the northern Washington highlands that he thought she wouldn't notice him reading. She noticed everything. She simply chose her battles. He also had power, and that power for the past 2 years had been growing with an urgency that was beginning to outpace everything she knew how to do about it. It came as gold light, the unmistakable frequency of royal alpha energy, undiluted, increasingly unwilling to stay contained. It came when he was startled, when he was moved, when he was focused on something that mattered. A retired supernatural practitioner in Seabridge named Oren had helped her with the ward work for years, asking no questions, charging honest rates. And 3 months ago, Oren had looked at the latest suppression framework and said, with the neutrality of someone concealing something significant, Ms. Vael, this is holding the way a dam holds water when the water has decided it wants to be a river. You understand my meaning. She understood. What Oren did not say, what she already knew and had been quietly dreading for 2 years, was that the dam was not just Emric's power containment. It was hers. The bond suppression she renewed every year had been calibrated for one energy signature. Emric's Royal Alpha Gold, growing stronger every month, was bleeding into that calibration, disrupting it. The two things she had been managing separately, his power, her bond, were beginning to interfere with each other in ways no annual renewal could fully address. She had felt it for months. The bond, which had been dim and muted and carefully cloaked for 12 years, was beginning to surface, not loudly, not yet, but in the way of things that have been suppressed too long and are running out of patience. The morning the unraveling truly began started like any other. Emric at the kitchen table with a navigational chart spread beneath his cereal bowl. Rowan at the counter with her first coffee. The gray October light coming off the water and doing what October light on the Oregon coast always does, making everything look like the beginning of a story that is not going to go the way you planned. She noticed the gold first, a shimmer around the edges of his fingers as he traced a coastline, brighter than yesterday, less contained than last week. Emric. I know. He pressed his fingers flat against the table without looking up. The light subsided, not gone, just pushed down, the way you push something that is going to come back up. It's getting harder to hold. How much harder? He looked up then, and in his expression was the thing she'd been watching grow alongside the power for the past year. The quiet, specific knowledge of someone who has arrived at a conclusion he's not entirely sure his mother is ready to hear. Harder than I can explain without worrying you, he said, which means very hard. A pause. Someone was watching the workshop yesterday from the end of the south dock. He stayed almost an hour. He smelled like pack, Mama. Strong pack. High rank. The coffee was very still in Rowan's hands. What did he look like? Tall, gray coat, scar across his left hand. I could see it from the upstairs window. He watched her face. You know who it is. She did. She had known the name Aldrich Sorrel for 12 years. Known it the way you know the names of things you hope will never find you. Cassian's Beta, his most trusted tracker, the sharpest, most patient hunter in the Northern Vael pack. If Aldrich was on her dock, he hadn't arrived yesterday. He had been narrowing the distance for weeks, and he wasn't here for her. He was here because Emric's power signature had been leaking. Quietly, incrementally, long enough that the right instruments had picked it up and followed it to its source. To this kitchen, to this table, to the 12-year-old boy with royal alpha gold rising around his hands and a wall of navigational charts in his bedroom, and 12 years of carefully managed invisibility that was, right now, ending. Rowan set her cup down. She looked at her son. At the steadiness in him, the complete considered absence of fear in his face. Because he had already thought this through, she could see that he had. We need to talk, she said. Yes. He folded the chart with careful precision. Then, but Mama. He looked at her directly with the expression she had no adequate name for. I need you to actually listen, not manage. Listen. She looked at her son, at the boy she had built a life around protecting, at the person he had become while she was busy keeping him safe. I'm listening, she said. Outside on the south dock, the gray coat had not moved, and inside the kitchen in Seabridge, something that had been held in careful suspension for 12 years was finally, irrevocably, beginning to fall. Chapter 2. To understand why Rowan Vael had chosen to die, you had to go back 12 years and 4 months, back to a mountain estate in the northern Washington highlands, where the pines grew so dense that moonlight came through in fragments, and a woman who had not yet learned to be afraid of the wrong things stood outside a half-open door and heard 40 seconds of a conversation that rearranged the entire architecture of her future. She had been 26 when she met Cassian Drave, not sought him out, been sent. Her elder, a woman of fierce precision named Aldara, had arranged a formal consultation between Rowan's traveling herbalist practice and the Northern Vael pack. Large, well-organized, a reputation for running clean territory and paying consultants fairly. Rowan had prepared herself for a powerful alpha. She had developed over years of pack circuit work, a competent professional distance that served her well in rooms full of power. She had not been prepared for the specific quality of Cassian Drave's attention. He opened the door himself, shook her hand himself, listened to her initial presentation with the focused, genuine engagement of someone who found the subject actually interesting. Not politically convenient, not socially necessary. When she said something he disagreed with, he said so directly without softening it, then waited with what appeared to be genuine curiosity to hear her response. She had disagreed back. He had smiled, not the managed smile of someone handling a professional interaction, the real kind, the kind that happens before the decision to smile catches up with the face. She had, in that moment, been in considerable trouble. She had known it immediately and done nothing useful about it. The bond had confirmed what she already suspected. It settled into her chest the moment their hands touched, quiet, absolute, the specific sensation of something that has always been true being acknowledged for the first time. She had driven back to her lodgings and sat with it in the dark and thought very deliberately, all right, this is what is happening. You will need to be careful. She had not been careful. She had fallen in love with him the way you fall from a significant height, not gradually, not with warning, but all at once with the immediate total understanding that there was no return to the altitude you had been at before. He was brilliant and exacting and capable of a tenderness that seemed to genuinely surprise him when he found it in himself. He made her feel like her mind was the most interesting place he had access to, like he was specifically and deliberately interested in the person she was rather than the function she might serve. 8 months in, the pregnancy confirmed on a morning when the Highland sky was doing something extraordinary with the early light. She had sat in her car afterward with both hands on the wheel and thought, I have to tell him today. Whatever comes next, we face it together. She had been so certain of the together. She came back to the estate in the early evening, went looking for Cassian, found his study door half open, voices inside, Cassian and his beta Jaren, a sharp, efficient man who had always looked at Rowan with the particular assessment of someone calculating how she fit into a structure she hadn't been born into. She raised her hand to knock. Then she heard her own name. If Rowan's pregnancy is confirmed, Jaren was saying, the council will invoke the heir separation protocol immediately. You know this. 7 generations of precedent. The heir is removed from the mother within the first year and raised within the pack structure directly. The mother receives a formal secondary position but loses primary. I know the protocol, Cassian said. Flat in the way she had learned meant controlled rather than calm. I've been reviewing it. Then you know the council won't accept. The child will not be separated from its mother. Quiet, absolute. I don't care what 7 generations of precedent says. I am reviewing the legal grounds to have that clause formally removed before... She did not hear the rest. She was already moving. Down the corridor, down the stairs, out through the garden entrance into the cold night air that hit her face like a verdict. Her mind running one sentence on a loop with the clarity of something branded rather than thought. They will take my child. The protocol. They will take my child within the first year. She had heard. The heir is removed from the mother. She had not stayed to hear. The child will not be separated from its mother. She missed it by 4 seconds, by the time it took her to turn and walk and decide. Those 4 seconds cost her 12 years, cost him 12 years, cost Emric the first 12 years of a father. She had not known. She could not have known. She heard what she heard and acted on it with everything she was. Every instinct sharpened by a childhood spent watching adults treat children like furniture to be arranged rather than people to be considered. She heard removed from the mother, and every protective, ferocious, uncompromising piece of her said, not this child, not mine. She staged her death that same night using the only resource she had prepared for a moment she had always hoped would never come. Her grandmother, a woman who had survived a pack political purge 2 generations ago by being prepared before she needed to be, had left Rowan something on her 18th birthday. Not money, a plain envelope, a name, a number, a letter in small, precise handwriting that said simply, I hope you never need this. I suspect you will. Inside was a contact, a woman who asked no questions, charged no judgment, and could arrange the kind of disappearance that left nothing for even the most powerful alpha to follow. Rowan had carried that envelope for 8 years across every flat and every life, never opening it. She opened it that night, standing in the cold of the estate car park with the study lights still on above her, and understood with complete devastating clarity exactly what her grandmother had seen in her eyes the day she was born. The bond suppressor worked by cloaking rather than cutting. A true mate bond cannot be broken. Every elder, every text, every tradition is clear on this, but it can be wrapped, dimmed, muffled into something that feels, from the outside, like the specific, terrible silence of a signal whose source is gone. From his side, it would feel like grief. From her side, and this was the cost she agreed to without flinching because she had no alternative and would have agreed to worse. From her side, she would feel everything, every pulse of loss he sent through the bond, every moment he reached for her and found nothing. She would carry that signal for as long as the suppression held. The woman had told her this clearly before she began. Rowan had said, "Do it anyway." The suppression needed renewing every year. It was expensive. It was painful each time. It was the real reason she had needed Oren, not just the wards around the cottage and the workshop, but the annual work of keeping the bond cloaked, keeping herself invisible to the one person whose supernatural senses were calibrated after 8 months of bonding to find her anywhere. Cassian had woken to an empty room and a report that arrived 4 days later, an accident on the mountain road. Confirmed. She had loved him enough to make it clean. No trail, no hope. A closed door because she believed an open one would only lead him back to a fight she was certain he would lose against his own counsel. And she would not let her child be the prize at the center of that fight. She had told herself it was mercy. She had told herself it was the only way. For 12 years, in the quiet hours, she had told herself these things with the discipline of someone who understands that some truths, examined too closely, make it impossible to keep going. Now she told Emric all of it, sitting across the kitchen table in Seabridge with the gold light warm around his hands and the gray coat still visible on the south dock. She told it without softening the parts that reflected badly on her judgment. He listened with his full attention, and when she finished, the kitchen was very quiet. He said the child would not be separated. Emric said slowly, "You just didn't hear that part." "No." He absorbed this. So he might not have... I don't know. Honest. I have spent 12 years not knowing that, and choosing, because I didn't know, to assume the worst. She looked at her hands. That was my choice. I own it. A long silence. Then Emric said, with the quiet, settled tone of someone who has finished processing something and arrived on the other side of it, "We have to go there." Emric, not for him. He looked at her directly. "For me. My power is past what you and Oren can manage. You know that. The only person who can train a royal alpha heir is a royal alpha." A pause. "And Aldrich Sorrel is on our dock, which means Cassian already knows something exists. He just doesn't know what." His jaw set. So completely precisely his father's jaw that Rowan had to look at the window for a moment. "I would rather he find out from me than from a beta's report." Rowan looked at her son. At the 12 years of him, the charts on the wall, the fraying cuff, the gold light steady as a held breath around his hands. At the person she had built her entire life around protecting, who was sitting across from her and telling her, calmly and completely correctly, that the protection was over, that it was time for something else. "If we go," she said carefully, "we go on my terms, my conditions. Non-negotiable." "Yes, he gets no claim on you that you don't choose to give him." "I know. And Emric..." She waited until he met her eyes. "Whatever he is, whatever happened between us, you are mine first. You have always been mine first." Her son looked at her across the table with those dark, steady, gold-lit eyes and said, "I know, Mama. I've always known that. That's why I've been able to wait this long." She reached across the table and put her hand over his. The gold light rose around both of them, warm and enormous, and for a moment the kitchen in Seabridge was the brightest room on the Oregon coast. That evening, Rowan Vael packed 2 bags, not the emergency kind, not the running kind, the kind you pack when you are going toward something, When she was done, she stood in Emric's doorway and watched him carefully fold the Northern Vael territory chart last. Fold it precisely, tuck it into the front pocket of his bag where he could reach it easily. She went to bed, and for the first time in 12 years, she did not dream about running. Chapter 3. They left Seabridge on a Thursday morning. Gray sky, salt wind off the water, the south dock quiet in the early hour. Rowan had told Oren the night before, simply and without unnecessary detail, that she was closing the workshop for an indefinite period. Oren had looked at her for a long moment. Then, "The dam, Ms. Vael." She had nodded. He had nodded back. That was enough. What she did not know, pulling out of the Seabridge lane onto the coast road with Emric navigating from the passenger seat, was that 40 seconds behind them, a dark vehicle pulled out from the side road, where it had been parked since yesterday morning, and began to follow, at a distance precise enough to be invisible and close enough to be effective. Aldrich Sorrel had been in Seabridge for 19 days. He had arrived with a single instruction from the Alpha King, delivered in the particular quiet of Cassian's private office on the evening he had laid the surveillance report on the desk. The ward system alert, the power signature, the bloodline frequency that matched one source and one source only in the entire Pacific Northwest. Cassian had sat with the report for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "Go, confirm only, do not make contact, come back with the truth." Aldrich had gone. He had confirmed. He had stood on the south dock in a gray coat for 3 weeks, long enough to see the woman, to see the boy, to feel the power signature at close enough range to remove any remaining doubt. He had filed his report. And then Cassian had said 4 words that told Aldrich everything about the state of his alpha. Stay with them. Both. So he had stayed, watching the workshop, watching the boy walk to school and back, watching the woman close the shutters every night and open them every morning with the contained discipline of someone who has been surviving deliberately for a long time. And then on a Thursday morning, he had watched them pack the car and pull out onto the coast road, and he had followed, at his 40-second distance, unhurried, certain, all the way from Oregon north through Washington state and into the highland edges of Northern Vael territory. He knew where they were going. He had prepared for where they were going. 2 days before they left Seabridge, Aldrich had made a phone call to the palace household staff. He had described 2 rooms, one for a woman, one for a boy. The woman's room facing the Highland Oak Grove, with proper herbalist shelving in the adjoining study because she would need somewhere to work and would not ask for it. The boy's room with a full wall of pinboard, because Aldrich had read the surveillance notes carefully and understood what the boy collected. Fresh charts from the PAC cartography office, the territorial surveys that were not publicly available. He had not told Cassian he had done this. He had simply done it, because 15 years of serving this alpha had taught him to recognize the ending of a story that had needed to end for a long time, and to prepare the space for it before anyone else had caught up to what was coming. They stopped for the night at an inn, 8 miles from the palace. PAC-adjacent territory, neutral ground, the kind of establishment that asked no unnecessary questions. Rowan paid for 1 room. Aldrich watched from the car park as the lights went on in a first-floor window, and an hour later, went off. He settled in to wait. He did not expect what happened next. At 10 minutes past 4 in the morning, the first-floor curtain moved. Then a door at the side of the inn opened. Slowly, carefully, the specific controlled care of someone trying not to wake the person sleeping inside, and a 12-year-old boy stepped out into the pre-dawn dark with his bag on his back and his hands glowing faintly gold at his sides, and the particular movement of someone who has made a decision and is not second-guessing it. Aldrich was out of the car before the boy had taken 10 steps. He did not call out. He did not intercept. He watched Emric orient himself in the dark, watched him pull the territory chart from his front pocket, check it once in the faint light of his own gold, fold it away again, and understood, with the immediate precision of a man who has been a tracker for 20 years, that the boy did not need the chart. He already knew the way. He had always known the way. The chart was simply something to hold. Aldrich made 2 decisions in 30 seconds. The first, he sent his second, a young pack member named Corvin, positioned at the far end of the car park. Ahead on foot with a single instruction. Shadow the boy all the way to the court. Stay unseen. Let him walk in alone. But if anything threatens him between here and those doors, you handle it before he knows it was ever a threat. Corvin went. The second decision, Aldrich went back inside the inn, climbed the stairs, and knocked on the door of room 7. The silence on the other side lasted 4 seconds. Then the sound of someone coming awake so fast it amounted to already being awake. And the door opened, and Rowan Vael stood in the doorway in the gray pre-dawn, with her coat already half on, and her eyes doing the rapid, precise calculation of a woman who has been a light sleeper for 12 years and has just identified exactly what woke her. "Where is he?" she said. Not a question. "Walking to the court." Aldrich held her gaze. "He left 10 minutes ago. I have a man with him. He doesn't know. He is safe, Ms. Vael. My man will not let anything reach him." She stared at him. He could see the collision of it moving through her face. The terror, the fury, the specific, devastated pride of a mother who has raised someone brave enough to do the thing she couldn't. He gave her a moment. Just a moment. "Get your coat," he said. "I'll drive you." She was in the car in 45 seconds. They drove through the Highland dark in silence for several minutes. Then Rowan said, without turning from the road, "He sent you." "Yes." "How long have you been in Seabridge?" 19 days. She absorbed this. He knew. Before we left. "He suspected," Aldrich said carefully. "The ward system registered a Royal Alpha signature from an unregistered source approximately 8 weeks ago. It was not only the power signature." He kept his eyes on the road. The frequency that came through, layered underneath the Royal Alpha gold, carried a bond resonance. His bond resonance. A pause. The ward system flagged it as a bloodline match. He knew immediately it was not simply a rogue heir. The bond frequency does not replicate. It is specific to him and one other person. He said nothing further. He didn't need to. Rowan looked at the dark road and understood. Emric's growing power had not just broken the containment wards, it had cracked open the suppression she had maintained for 12 years. The bond had surfaced through her son, and Cassian had felt it, not as her, not as a clear signal, but as something unmistakably connected to him, something alive, something that should not have been possible. That was why he had not sent an army. That was why he had sent one man with one instruction, confirm only, because he had not dared to believe what he was already beginning to feel. Observe only. No contact, that was the instruction, Aldrich said. And coming here, following us? Stay with them, both. He glanced at her briefly. "He did not send me to retrieve you, Ms. Vael. He sent me to make sure you arrived safely if you chose to come. There is a meaningful difference." Rowan looked at the Highland pines coming up on either side as they moved deeper into the territory. She felt the ward boundaries shifting around the car, the dense layered presence of northern Vael pack territory pressing against the windows like something that recognized her. "The rooms," she said. "At the palace. Did you arrange them?" A pause. "Yes." "Before we left Oregon?" 2 days before. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, almost to herself, "He was certain we were coming." He was hopeful, Aldrich said, and said nothing else. The palace gates came into view, stone, enormous, lit by warm gold in the pre-dawn dark. Aldrich pulled through and parked, and when he opened the car door, the Highland air hit Rowan's face, and she stood still for a moment on the gravel drive and breathed it, cold and pine-sharp, and carrying beneath it something older, something that resonated at a frequency she had spent 12 years refusing to name. The bond, responding to the territory, responding to his proximity somewhere inside those walls. "He's in the court," Aldrich said. "They both are. The session was already convened when Emric arrived." He looked at her steadily. "Your rooms are ready. First and second on the east corridor. I had the herbalist shelving installed in the adjoining study. The boys' room has charts, the territorial surveys from the cartography office. He'll want to check them against what he already knows." Rowan looked at the palace, at the windows of the east corridor where lights were on, at the home that had been waiting for her, made ready by a man who served a king who'd been hoping quietly across 12 years without ever saying it out loud. She looked at Aldrich. "Why did you let him go?" she asked. "Emric, you could have stopped him." Aldrich was quiet for a moment. "Because he was right to go." He held her gaze with the undecorated steadiness of someone who says exactly what he means and nothing else. "And because you are already home, Ms. Vael, you simply have not said it out loud yet." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned toward the palace doors. "Take me to the court," she said. Chapter 4. The Pack Court was in full session when Emric arrived, and he had planned for that. He had studied the court layout from Pack records accessed through the university library system, had known for 2 years the shape of the building, the position of the main doors, the formal structure of a council session. He had memorized what he needed. He had a speech prepared, not a long one. He was not here to perform. He was here to say what was true, clearly and completely, and let the truth do what truth does when it is given room. He was also aware, walking through the palace grounds in the pre-dawn dark with the Highland air cold against his face and the gold light rising warm around his hands, that someone was following him. About 40 feet back, moving with the careful quiet of someone trained to move quietly, staying in the shadows of the tree line. He said nothing. He kept walking. Whoever it was had been sent to protect him, not stop him. He understood that immediately. He was familiar with the shape of protection. He recognized it even when it wore someone else's face. He was not as alone as he was pretending not to notice. He found that, inexplicably, comforting. The court doors were exactly as he had studied them. Stone, enormous. The carved arch carrying its weight of names in the gray pre-dawn. 2 guards formally positioned, their energy signatures the dense particular quality of high-ranked wolves who'd been doing this long enough to be unimpressed by most things. They were making a reasonable effort to appear unimpressed by him. He felt their assessment, the automatic power reading that pack wolves do before conscious thought catches up, and watched the moment it registered, the moment the frequency of his energy returned, something that should not be here, something that matched a bloodline they knew and could not account for. "Session is in progress," the taller guard said, professional, composed, barely. "No admittance without—" "My name is Emric," he said. "My mother's name is Rowan Vael." He let that land for one breath. "I think the Alpha King will want to know I'm here." The guards looked at each other. An entire conversation happened in that look. "Wait here," the taller one said, and went inside. Emric waited exactly 4 minutes. Then he walked through the doors. The session was formal. Council in tiered seating, 4 senior officials at the presentation table, a boundary report in progress. The air inside was thick with pack authority, heavy, layered, the accumulated weight of significant power in an enclosed space. It pressed against his chest like a hand. He breathed through it, kept walking. The boundary report stopped. 200 faces turned. Emric walked the full length of the court floor in the complete silence of a room that has just encountered something it did not expect and has not yet decided how to process. He did not hurry. He did not look at the council tiers or the officials or the guards moving belatedly from their positions. He looked at the man at the head of the room. Only at him. Cassian Drave had gone completely still. He was exactly as Emric had imagined, and nothing like it. Larger. Not just physically, but in the way that real power is always larger than its description. More contained. He had the particular quality of someone who has been carrying an enormous weight for a very long time, and has built his composure around the carrying of it. He was looking at Emric with an expression that was moving through stages too fast to track. Surprise. Then the automatic alpha-deep assessment of power meeting power, reading the signature, reading the bloodline, and then something that cracked through the composure like a fault line moving, slow, irreversible. Emric stopped before the head of the room. He looked up at his father. He let the gold light rise. Not contained, not managed. Here, in this room, containment was no longer the point. It rose from his hands warm and enormous and unmistakable. Royal alpha gold, flooding the cold stone space of the court chamber. And he heard what moved through the assembled pack at the sight of it. Not alarm, not aggression. Something older than either. The sound a room makes when it recognizes something it has been missing without knowing what to call the missing. "My name is Emric," he said. His voice was clear and steady in the acoustics of the chamber. "My mother's name is Rowan Vael. You knew her 12 years ago." He held Cassian's gaze. "I know you sent your beta to find us. I know he confirmed what you suspected." He paused. "I am here so you do not have to suspect anymore. I am your son. My power is past what my mother can manage alone, and I need to be trained by someone who carries the same bloodline. That is why I am here." He reached into his jacket pocket and set the folded Northern Vael territory chart on the table before him. Worn at the folds from 2 years of handling. "I have been studying this territory since I was 10 years old. I thought it was time to see it properly." The silence that followed was the most complete silence Emric had ever stood inside. And then, Cassian Drave, Alpha King, most powerful supernatural in 3 territories, a man who had not in 12 years of ruling this court been visibly dismantled by anything, stepped around the council table, crossed the chamber floor, and crouched down in front of his son so that they were exactly eye level. The pack read what that gesture meant. The meaning moved through the room like a wave that changes the shape of everything it touches permanently. This close, Emric could see what the distance had not shown him. The 12 years of it. Not in age exactly, but in weight. In the specific quality of a face that has been carrying something enormous for a long time and has built its composure around the carrying. He could feel the bond, the deep, warm, enormous pull resonating at the exact frequency of his own power, his father's frequency, the same blood, the same line, vibrating in recognition of itself. "Emric," Cassian said. His voice was very low, unsteady in a way it had clearly never been designed to be. "How old are you?" 12, Emric said. Something moved through Cassian's expression, enormous and unguarded. He pressed his mouth together for a moment, his eyes closed briefly. When they opened, they were very bright. 12 years, he said softly. The words were not for the court. They were a reckoning spoken quietly at the scale of what 12 years actually meant. "Yes," Emric said. He let the silence hold for a moment, then, "I don't need you to be sorry. I need you to teach me what I am. The rest we can figure out as we go." A pause. "If you want to." Cassian looked at his son, at the navy jacket with the fraying cuff, at the dark hair, the steady gold light, the 12 years of a person who had been built without him and had come here anyway, on his own, in the pre-dawn dark, with a territory chart in his pocket and his mother's stubbornness in his spine. He put his hand on Emric's shoulder, carefully, the way you touch something you were afraid you would never have the chance to hold. "Yes," he said, quiet and absolute. "I want to." In the back of the room, a pack official had already slipped through the side door, moving quickly, because the Alpha King needed to know what was coming through the palace gates right now. And in the pre-dawn dark of the palace drive, a car pulled through the gates, and Aldrich Sorrel opened the passenger door, and Rowan Vael stepped out onto the gravel and stood still for a moment in the cold Highland air, breathing the territory she had left 12 years ago and which had, without her permission or her knowledge, continued to be hers. Chapter 5. Aldrich walked her through the palace and into the court and stopped at the inner doors. He did not go in with her. "This," his posture said without words, "is not my room to enter." She went in alone. The formal session had broken its geometry. Council members still in tiered positions, but turned and speaking in low voices, the atmosphere of a room that has witnessed something significant and is still absorbing the aftershock. She moved through the outer chamber, through the inner doors, and stopped. Emric was standing near the head of the room and the gold light steady around his hands. She registered this first, the maternal inventory, automatic and non-negotiable, cataloging him for damage before she allowed herself to look at anything else. He was fine. He was completely, entirely fine. He was standing with the settled composure of someone who has done a significant thing and is at peace with having done it. When he saw her, something in his face eased. The specific quiet easing of someone who has been brave alone and is relieved, at last, not to be. And then the man beside him turned. She had told herself on the drive through the Highland dark that she was prepared for this moment. She understood immediately and completely that she was not. The bond, which had spent 12 years pulled taut between absence and suppression, running at a dim, managed frequency she'd convinced herself was simply part of her internal landscape now, hit her like a wave she'd forgotten the actual scale of, not a memory of the feeling itself, full and warm and enormous and entirely beyond the management she had built around it. Every wall she had constructed across 12 years of deliberate suppression became, in the moment, Cassian Drave turned toward her, simply irrelevant. He looked like someone encountering a thing they had stopped believing was real. She had known, abstractly, that 12 years would change him. She had not been prepared for the specific way, not aged, not diminished, but waited, settled into himself in a way that the man she had known at 26 had still been in the process of becoming. There was something in his face she recognized because she had built the same quality in herself across the same 12 years. The particular composure of someone who has been carrying something enormous for a long time and has learned to make the carrying invisible. He said her name. Just that. Just Rowan. And the way he said it was not the controlled delivery of an Alpha King addressing a situation. It was the sound a person makes when they say the name of something they believed was gone forever and have just been shown was not. "Hello, Cassian," she said. Her voice was steady. It cost her considerably. He crossed the chamber, stopped 6 feet from her, close enough that the bond was a physical weight between them, warm and present, and utterly beyond her current capacity to manage. He looked at her face with the specific attention of someone checking memory against reality, confirming detail by detail that this is not a mistake. "You're alive," he said. Low, not yet an accusation. The foundational fact, the thing everything else would have to be built on top of. "You have been alive." "Yes, 12 years. I know what I chose and what it cost," she said quietly. "I am not going to ask you to receive it easily. I am going to ask you to let me explain it, not as a defense, as the truth. You deserve the truth. You have deserved it for 12 years. Something shifted in his expression, the controlled surface giving way fractionally to something more complicated underneath. His eyes moved to Emric, to their son, standing at the side of the room with the expression of someone who has said what he came to say and is now giving the adults the room to be whatever they need to be. Cassian looked at him for a long, unguarded moment, and in that look was everything. 12 years of absence, the overwhelming reality of what had been built without him, the specific, devastating wonder of encountering a person who is yours in ways you have no framework for yet. "He's extraordinary," Cassian said, very quietly. Something cracked in her chest. She had expected accusation, demand, the Alpha King requiring an accounting. She had not expected those to be his first words about their son. "I know," she said. "Quieter now." "Is there somewhere we can speak privately?" she asked. "Yes, immediately. Come with me." She followed him through the chamber and into the private receiving room adjacent to the court. Stone walls, a long table, a window looking out onto the Highland pines where the morning light was beginning to come through in the particular fragmented way of light through dense trees, the kind of light that has no interest in being manageable. Chapter 6. She told him everything, without softening, without the diplomatic shaping of a story designed to make the teller look reasonable. She told him about the study door and the half-open inch and the 40 seconds and the 12 words she had heard. The air is removed from the mother, and the words she had not stayed to hear. She told him about the decision made in cold night air with every piece of herself firing the same instruction, "Not this child, not mine." She told him about the contact, the documentation, the drive through the dark toward a life she would build from nothing. She told him about the first year, the inland town, the laundromat room, the night Emric was born. She told him about Seabridge and the workshop and 12 years of building something real with her own hands and no safety net. She told him about Emric, the charts, the questions, the quality of stillness that had always belonged entirely to himself, about the power growing faster than she could manage. When she finished, the room was very quiet. Cassian had not moved, had not interrupted, had listened with the quality of attention she had fallen in love with 12 years ago. 40 seconds, he said. "Yes. You heard 40 seconds?" "Yes." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I had been working on the legal revision for 3 weeks before that conversation." His voice was very controlled and very low. "Jaren came to tell me the council was going to invoke the protocol the moment the pregnancy was confirmed. I told him I had already begun the process of blocking it. The conversation you heard, the beginning of it, was me telling him it was already in motion." He held her gaze. "The child will not be separated from its mother." That was the next sentence, 4 seconds after the part you heard. 4 seconds, Rowan. She absorbed this. "I know," she said quietly. "I found the legal block in the PAC archive, filed 11 days after I disappeared. I have spent 2 years knowing that I ran from a conversation that was already going the way I needed it to go. How did you live with that?" "The same way I lived with everything else," she said, by focusing on what existed rather than what might have been. It was not always enough, but it was what I had. The silence settled differently now, softer at the edges, the quality shifting from two people standing on opposite sides of something to two people standing inside the same thing together. I knew you were alive, he said quietly, looking at the window, not performing it, making it because it needed to be made, not with certainty, but the bond. He stopped. A true mate bond does not break at death. I knew that. I consulted 3 elders in the first year privately, without telling anyone why I was asking. They all told me the same thing. The bond was dim, muted, not gone. He looked at her. I chose to interpret that as the depth of the bond rather than evidence you were alive, because believing you were alive and not being able to find you was not survivable. So I chose the other interpretation, and I built my life around it. I know, she said. And then, because they were being completely honest, and she owed him this, I felt it, from my side. The suppression worked one way. From yours, it dimmed me to almost nothing. From mine, I felt everything. She looked at her hands. Every time you reached through the bond and found silence. Every year when the grief would move through it in waves, I couldn't stop feeling. I carried that for 12 years, Cassian. 12 years of feeling you lose me over and over and not being able to tell you I was there. Her voice was steady. She'd had 12 years to make it steady about this. That was the cost I agreed to. I want you to know I understood exactly what I was agreeing to. The room was very quiet. He looked at her for a long time. Something moved through his expression. Not anger, not pity. Something rawer than either. The specific devastated reckoning of a man being shown, for the first time, the full shape of what something cost the person he loved. You felt me grieving, he said very quietly, for 12 years. Yes, she said. He pressed his hand flat on the table, looked at it, then at her. I'm sorry. He stopped, started again. I'm sorry that you carried that alone. She reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. We both carried it, she said, just from different sides of the same wall. The silence between them held. Then, but you never took a mate, she said. He looked at her directly. No, 12 years, Cassian. Yes. The council tried. 4 formal introductions. Something crossed his expression. After the 4th refusal, they stopped asking. He held her gaze. The bond was there. Dim and quiet, but there. And bringing another person into something that was already spoken for, even in grief, even in loss, I could not do it. He paused. I also did not want to. In 12 years, not once. The room was very still. She felt the bond pull, patient and enormous and entirely done with being managed. She felt the grief underneath it, honest and real, and underneath both of those things, the 12 years of them. The parallel lives built in absence, the different shapes of the same loss, the stubbornly irrefutable fact that neither of them had been able to want anyone else. I need time, she said, not as a warning, as a fact. I am not running. Emric will be trained. He will know his father. That is not conditional on anything. But what is between us? I need time to stand inside it before I decide what to call it. Yes, he said, without hesitation. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, and his voice dropped to something quieter and more direct than anything he had said yet. I need you to know one thing. What? He looked at her across the table. Across the 12 years, across the bond and the grief and the 40 seconds and everything still being built in front of them. I would have chosen you, he said quietly, Against the council? Against the protocol? Against every political argument any of them could have made? I would have chosen you. I need you to know that. She looked at him for a long moment. I know, she said. I believe you. She held his gaze. I think I have always known that somewhere. I was simply too frightened to stay long enough to find out. The silence that followed had a quality it had not had before. Not resolved, but honest. Fully, finally, completely honest. They were still sitting like that, close enough that the bond was warm between them, not yet touching, not yet anything beyond this specific, charged, honest nearness, when the door opened. Aldrich. His expression was the precise neutral of a man delivering information he knows will be unwelcome. Forgive me, he said. You need to see this now. He set a document on the table between them. Pack Lord's Challenge of Fitness, filed this morning. Soren Kyle, Lord of the Kyle House, Northern Vael Pack. 3 subjects: the fitness of the returned mate, the standing of an heir raised outside pack structure, the judgment of an alpha who had failed to register his own bloodline for 12 years. He filed it the moment Emric walked into court, Aldrich said. He had it ready. He was waiting for an opening. How long do we have? Cassian said. A formal pack assembly, 7 days. Rowan looked at the document, at her name on it, at Emric's name on it, at the specific cold political precision of a man who had taken the most vulnerable moment of their lives and filed paperwork around it. She felt something move through her that was not fear. It was older than fear and considerably less patient. 7 days, she said. Yes, Aldrich said. She looked at Cassian. Tell me about Soren Kale, she said. Everything, now. Outside the receiving room window, the Highland morning was fully gold, and in his private office in the Quail House, Soren Kale allowed himself one small, precise, satisfied smile. He had waited 4 years for a door into Cassian Drave's reign. He had just walked through it, or so he believed. Chapter 7. Soren Kale was 53 years old, 4th-generation Northern Vael pack lord, and the most dangerous kind of political animal, the kind that never raises his voice. He had inherited 3,000 acres of highland territory from his father and spent 30 years expanding his family's influence inside the pack with the patient, methodical precision of someone who understands that power accumulated quietly is power that cannot be easily challenged. He had been a quiet supporter of Cassian's early reign. He had withdrawn that support invisibly 4 years ago when Cassian restructured the council and removed the mechanisms through which families like the Kales had traditionally managed their access to alpha decision-making. He had not protested. He had simply recalibrated, waited, watched for the moment when the door opened. Aldrich laid it out for them in the receiving room, Rowan and Cassian across the table, the challenge document between them. He has been preparing this for approximately 18 months, Aldrich said. The Pack Lord's Challenge of Fitness has been invoked 4 times in the Pack's recorded history. He has 3 things working in his favor. 1, the challenge is legal. There is no procedural basis to dismiss it. 2, the questions he is raising are questions the Pack is already asking quietly. He is simply saying aloud what others are whispering. 3, he has the support of 2 other noble houses. Not publicly, but I have confirmation. What does he actually want? Rowan asked. To freeze the heir registration process, Cassian said. If the assembly votes to uphold the challenge, it triggers a formal review. During the review, I cannot officially name Emric as heir. Extended reviews create political instability. Political instability creates opportunity for families like his. He looked at the document. He doesn't want to be alpha. He wants to be the man who controls access to the alpha. He wants Emric to be a question mark long enough to become irrelevant, Rowan said. Yes. She looked at the document, at her name, at Emric's name, at the precise, careful language of a man who had taken the most painful thing she had ever navigated and filed a legal claim around it. What does the pack assembly require to defeat it? Aldrich answered. Soren presents his case. The Alpha's household responds. The pack votes. A simple majority against the challenge ends it completely and cannot be re-invoked on the same grounds. So we have to make the case, she said, publicly, before the full pack. Yes, Cassian said. He looked at her steadily. I will handle it. You have been here less than a day. You do not have to. Don't, she said, quietly, not unkindly, but completely firm. He stopped. She looked at him. I did not come here to be handled. I did not come here to be protected from consequences or managed away from difficulty. I came here because my son decided it was time. And because I decided deliberately, with full knowledge, that I was done running. She paused. Soren Kale has put my name on a document that questions whether I am fit to stand beside you. He has put my son's name on a document that questions whether Emric has the right to exist in this pack as what he is. Her voice was steady and carried something in it that had nothing to do with performance. I will be at that assembly. I will stand, and I will let this pack decide what I am based on the truth rather than his version of it. The receiving room was very quiet. Cassian looked at her for a long moment, at the woman across the table, at 12 years of her, at everything she had survived and built and chosen and brought here of her own will, and she watched what that did to his face, watched something give way, not collapse, give way. The specific internal shift of someone who has been carrying a weight alone for a very long time and has just been offered help by the one person whose help he would accept. You don't have to be ready, he said quietly. Not for all of it. I know, she said. I want to. Those 4 words. She watched them land, watched them move through him like light through water, spreading, settling, reaching into places that 12 years of careful management had kept in the dark. He reached across the table, set his hand over hers on the surface of the challenge document, not claiming, just present, just there. Then we stand together, he said. She looked at his hand over hers, at the specific warmth of it, the bond resonating at the contact, warm and wide and patient. She turned her hand over, laced her fingers through his. Together, she said. Aldrich, standing at the door, said nothing. His expression was the precise neutral of a man feeling something significant and making a professional decision not to show it. He turned and went out and closed the door very quietly behind him. The 7 days that followed were the most instructive of Rowan's life. She learned the palace, not by being shown it, by moving through it, finding its rhythms, understanding where the light came through in the mornings and where the cold corridors were, and which of the household staff had decided, with the particular instinct of people who have been serving a household for years, that she was going to be fine. The ones who had decided this brought her tea without being asked and showed her where the herbalist stores were kept, depleted because there had been no one to maintain them, and left her to the work of restocking them with the quiet respect of people who understand that someone establishing themselves in a new space needs room to do it in their own way. She learned Emric's training schedule. He was out on the Highland grounds by 7 every morning, Cassian and Aldrich and 2 senior pack trainers working around him in the formation of people who have understood very quickly that the boy in the center learns faster than the training pace they had prepared for. She watched from the edge of the grounds on the third morning and felt the complex tidal thing. Pride and grief and gratitude, and something she was not ready to name, watching Cassian with their son. The way he adjusted his instruction when he saw Emric process something faster than expected. The way he looked at the boy when Emric wasn't watching, like someone still learning to hold the reality of something they had stopped believing was possible. Aldrich was at every session, positioned at the edge of the training ground, arms folded, saying little and watching everything. Emric noticed on the fourth morning, walked to where Aldrich was standing and said without preamble, "You sent someone with me that night, to the court." Aldrich looked at him, said nothing. Emric nodded once, satisfied. "Thank you," he said, and went back to training. Aldrich watched him go with the expression of a man recalibrating something important. Rowan prepared, because Soren Kale was not going to walk into that assembly with his quiet voice and his prepared documentation and his 4 years of careful positioning and find Rowan Vael unprepared. She read the challenge of fitness document 3 times until she understood every legal angle it invoked. She met with Elder Nessa, who received her with the dry warmth of a very old woman who finds the tendency of important things to eventually arrive exactly where they were supposed to be quietly vindicating, and learned the assembly protocol and what the pack would be watching for. She understood what Soren was counting on. He was counting on her uncertainty, on the 12 years of guilt, on the woman who had run from 40 seconds of a conversation, still having enough of the runner in her to hesitate when he turned the full weight of pack scrutiny on her story. He had profoundly miscalculated who she was now. On the 5th evening, Cassian came to find her in the herbalist study off her rooms. She had been reorganizing the stores, finding the work grounding. She was aware of him before she saw him. The bond, the warm, specific pull of it that she had stopped trying to manage and simply allowed to be present. "How are you?" he said. An actual question. "Preparing," she said. "You?" "The same." He came further into the room, stood across the work table from her in the lamplight, close enough that the bond was warm between them, far enough that nothing was assumed. He had been doing this across 5 days, coming to find her, being present without pressing, offering and not requiring. "Emric told me something this afternoon," he said. She looked up. "What?" He said, a pause, like the quote had landed on him again unexpectedly. "She came because I asked her to. But she's staying because she wants to. There's a difference, and you should probably know it." He held her gaze. Something in his expression was unguarded in the way it only was when they were alone. "He's 12 years old." "I know," she said. "He's right, though." He looked at her steadily. "Is he right?" She looked at her hands on the work table, at the Highland dark outside the study window, at the lamplight doing something completely unreasonable to the angle of his jaw. "Yes," she said quietly, "he's right." The distance between them in the lamplit herbalist study was 1 step. It had been 1 step for 5 days. Neither of them had crossed it. They were both aware of this with a precision that had grown across 5 days of proximity and honesty, and the patient, insistent pull of 12 years of bond into something that occupied all the available space in every room they shared. He crossed it, not to reach for her, to come closer, to stand near enough that she could feel the warmth of him, close enough for the bond to fully resonate, close enough that the question of what she wanted was not abstract anymore. He looked at her in the lamplight with an expression of such careful, undefended honesty that she felt it in her chest before she felt it anywhere else. "Rowan," he said, her name in his voice, the specific way he said it, The thing she had told herself for 12 years she did not miss and had been lying about for 12 years. She reached up and put her hand against the side of his face. The first deliberate touch, the first chosen one. She felt him go completely still, felt him hold his breath in the way of someone who is afraid that moving will break the thing that is happening. "I'm still afraid," she said quietly. "I know." He turned his face into her palm, his eyes closed. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you don't have to be." She looked at him, at his face in her hand, at the 12 years and the bond and the grief, and the boy sleeping down the corridor in a room full of maps prepared for him before he ever arrived. And she leaned forward and kissed him, not tentative, not questioning. She had been tentative and questioning for 12 years, and she was done with both. She kissed him with the full knowledge of what it meant and what it cost and what it was worth. And she felt him respond, both hands coming up to hold her face with the specific, careful tenderness of someone who has been given something they were afraid to want and is determined not to drop it. The kiss deepened into something that was not careful anymore. The 12 years of it, the 12 years of absence and suppression, and the bond running at its dim, patient frequency, and neither of them wanting anyone else, and both of them building their lives around an absence that was also underneath everything, a form of fidelity. All of that came through the kiss, like light through a window that had finally been opened, warm and overwhelming and completely right. The specific rightness of two things that belong together, finally being in the same place at the same time, with nothing left between them but the truth. He held her like something he had been afraid to hold, like something he had been calculating the weight of for 12 years and had finally been given permission to simply carry. And she held him back with the completeness of someone who has stopped negotiating with what she needs and has decided, at last, to simply need it. They stayed like that for a long time in the lamplight, not speaking, because nothing that needed to be said required words in this particular moment. The bond was open between them, fully, completely, for the first time in 12 years, and what moved through it was sufficient. When she finally pulled back, breathing, forehead resting against his, she laughed softly, almost to herself. "What?" he asked quietly. "Nothing," she said. "Just 5 days." She shook her head. "I have been standing one step away from you for 5 days. 6, he said. "I was counting." She looked at him, at the warmth in his face, the realness of it, the specific quality of a man who is no longer managing himself in her presence. "The assembly is in 2 days, she said. "Yes." "Then we finish this first, and then we face it." "Together," he said. "Together," she agreed. And 2 days later, on a gray Highland morning with the full Northern Vael pack assembled in the great court and Soren Coyle standing at the presentation table with his quiet voice and his prepared documentation, Rowan Vael walked in, not managed, not diplomatic, not careful. She walked in beside the Alpha King, with their son's gold light warm at the periphery, and Elder Nessa's eyes on her from the council tier, and she looked at Soren Kale across the chamber and felt nothing that resembled fear. What she felt was considerably simpler. She was done. She was home. And she was not going to let a man who had never met her tell her pack who she was. Chapter 8. Soren Kyle presented his case with the polished precision of a man who has been preparing it for 4 years. His voice never rose. His language never inflamed. He raised questions. That was all, he said, with the performed reasonableness of someone who knows that performed reasonableness is more dangerous than overt aggression. A mate who had faked her death. Was the pack to simply accept that without examination? A child born and raised entirely outside pack structure for 12 years. What values had been instilled? What allegiances had been formed? An alpha king who had not known his own heir existed. Was that not a question worth asking about the security and intelligence capacity of the court that served this pack? Each point delivered quietly, each one landing. He was good. Rowan gave him that. He was very good. When he finished, the assembly was silent. Then Cassian spoke. He spoke as Alpha, composed, authoritative, in complete command of the room. He answered each of Soren's procedural points with the precision of 12 years of governance. He was measured. He was effective. He addressed the challenge to his judgment directly and without flinching. Yes, he had not known his heir existed. That was the consequence of a choice he had made that had caused his mate to flee. A choice he had been accounting for since the morning he woke to an empty room 12 years ago. He named his own failure plainly and let it stand without excuse. The pack listened. The pack was not yet decided. Then Elder Nessa rose from the council tier. She was 91 years old. She had served this pack across 4 alpha reigns. She held in her hands a document retrieved from the pack's legal archive at Rowan's quiet, specific request 2 days ago. "I would like to present the assembly with something," she said, in the particular tone of a woman who does not ask permission and never has. Filed in the Northern Vael pack legal record 11 days after the reported death of Rowan Vael, 12 years ago. She held it up. A formal legal revision to pack inheritance law signed by the Alpha King, removing the heir separation protocol from the Northern Vael pack code permanently. The clause that would have separated a child from its mother within the first year of life. Removed. On the Alpha King's signature alone. Before he knew where his mate had gone. Before he knew she was alive. Before he knew a child existed. The silence in the assembly had a different quality now. He did not know if there was a child, Nessa continued. He did not know if Rowan Vael would ever return. He made this revision anyway, because it was right, because he had heard what his mate feared and had chosen to remove the source of that fear, regardless of whether she would ever know he had done it. She folded the document. That is the judgment of the Alpha King this assembly is being asked to question. She sat down. Soren Kael's quiet voice had gone very quiet indeed. Then Emric stepped forward. He had been standing at the side of the room with Aldrich. Aldrich positioned close, present, the posture of a man who will not intervene unless something threatens what he is protecting and has calculated the threshold for that intervention precisely. Emric stepped forward without asking anyone's permission, because he had his mother's complete disregard for waiting to be invited to speak when he had something to say. He stood in the center of the court floor. He was 12. He was wearing the navy jacket with the fraying cuff. The gold light rose around his hands, warm, enormous, entirely controlled. Not a display. Simply the natural consequence of a royal alpha heir standing in his father's court and feeling, for the first time in his life, entirely and unconditionally at home. He looked at Soren Kael. "You have questions about who I am," he said. His voice was clear and carrying. "I understand that. I am 12 years old and I grew up in Oregon, and I know more about maritime navigation than pack politics. And my mother raised me in a workshop above a dock because she was protecting me from exactly the kind of institutional machinery you are currently attempting to use." He paused. "She did not raise me to be afraid of questions. She raised me to answer them honestly." He let the gold blaze, full and uncontained and completely magnificent. "This is what I am. You can see it. You can feel it. It matches the bloodline of the man standing at the head of this room because it came from him. That is not a question. That is a fact, and I would respectfully suggest that the assembly vote accordingly." He went back to stand beside Aldrich. Aldrich said nothing. His expression was the precise neutral of a man who is extremely proud and has made a professional decision not to show it. He put his hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. Emric stood straight and looked at the room with the complete, uncomplicated confidence of someone who has said the true thing and has no anxiety about how it lands, because the true thing does not require defense. Then Rowan spoke. She had not planned what she would say the way she had planned other things. She had planned to be honest. That was all. Just honest in front of all of them, without the management or the strategy or the careful distance she had been maintaining between herself and the full weight of what this moment was. "My name is Rowan Vael," she said. 12 years ago, I stood outside a half-open door and heard 40 seconds of a conversation and made a decision based on those 40 seconds that cost everyone in this room something. It cost me 12 years of the life I should have been living. It cost my son 12 years of his father. It cost the man standing at the head of this room 12 years of his mate and his heir. And it cost this pack 12 years of its Luna. The assembly was absolutely still. "I am not going to ask you to forgive that," she said. "I am not here for forgiveness. I am here because my son walked into this court alone and told his father who he was, and because he was right to do it, and because the woman who would have hesitated to follow him is not the woman standing here now." She looked at the assembled pack. 200 wolves, every face turned toward her. And she let them read. She had nothing to hide. "I am a herbalist and a boat mechanic, and I can rebuild an outboard engine, and I know more about tidal systems than most people will find useful, and I am the mother of the extraordinary 12-year-old boy who just spoke to you, and I am the mate of your Alpha King, and I am home." She paused. "Not because I was brought here, not because I had no other option, because I chose to be deliberately, with full knowledge of what it costs and what it means." She looked at Soren Kale across the chamber. "Those are the answers to your questions. I hope they are sufficient, but I am going to be here regardless of whether they are. So the assembly may as well vote in favor of saving everyone the time." The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then the pack voted. The challenge of fitness failed, not narrowly, by a margin that left Soren Kale with no procedural basis for a second attempt and no political face with which to present one. He gathered his documents with the precise, controlled movements of a man who is furious and will not show it, and he walked out of the assembly without speaking, and the door closed behind him, and that was the end of it. Cassian looked at Rowan across the court chamber. In his expression was the thing she had watched building across 7 days, the specific look of a man who has been given back something he did not know how to live without, and has finally, at last, stopped being afraid to show it. She looked back and smiled, the real kind. The kind that comes from inside rather than being constructed for the situation. From the side of the room, Emric observed this exchange with the satisfied expression of someone whose plans have come together exactly as intended. Then he turned to Aldrich. "Is there food?" he said. "I've been standing in formal court sessions for 2 days and I'm extremely hungry." Aldrich looked down at him. Something in his expression shifted, the precise neutral cracking, just slightly, into something warmer. "There is food," he said. "Come on." They went, and behind them, the Alpha King crossed the chamber floor and reached for his mate's hand, and she gave it, and they walked out together into the Highland morning, where the light was warm, and the territory was theirs, and nothing left between them required management or distance, or the careful suppression of things that had always, regardless of everything, been true. Chapter 9. The Luna ceremony happened 12 days after the assembly, on a clear November evening when the highland sky did something extraordinary with the last of the autumn light, and the pack gathered in the great court, not because they were required to, but because they wanted to. That distinction, not required, wanted, was the thing Rowan noticed first when Aldrich told her what the attendance looked like. She had expected obligation. She received something closer to welcome. She wore deep green, her choice, not ceremonial prescription. The pack colors were midnight and gold, and she did not wear them because she was not yet ready to wear someone else's colors. And Cassian had said, without hesitation, that she should wear whatever she chose. She had chosen the green of the Oregon coast in winter because it was hers, and she was not leaving hers behind. She was adding to it. Emric stood beside her at the entrance to the court. He was wearing a new jacket, still navy but properly fitted. The cuff finally mended because Rowan had sat up the night before and mended it herself in the lamplight of her study, while Cassian sat across from her doing pack correspondence, and they shared the comfortable silence of two people who have stopped needing to fill every space with words. Emric had noticed the mended cuff this morning and said nothing about it. He had simply looked at her with the expression she had finally named, satisfied, complete, and put the jacket on. He took her arm as they walked in. "Ready?" he said. "Yes," she said, and meant it. The ceremony was conducted by Elder Nessa, who performed it with the dry, efficient warmth of a woman who has done this before and finds the ritual itself less interesting than the people inside it. She asked the questions the ceremony required. Cassian answered them. Rowan answered them. The bond, which had been fully open for 12 days now, fully settled and no longer fought, deepened at the formal words in the way that bonds deepen when acknowledged publicly, becoming something even more permanent than it had been, layering into the pack's collective consciousness the way that significant things layer in when they have finally been allowed to land. When it was done, when Nessa pronounced it complete and the court moved with the particular warm sound of a pack exhaling after a long-held breath, Cassian turned to her, and the look on his face in that moment, in the warm gold light of the court, with 200 of his people around them, and their son standing 6 feet away, watching with the expression of someone who has been right about something important and is very comfortable with that. The look on his face was the most unguarded thing she had ever seen from him, wide open, fully present, not managed, not controlled, not carrying the composed weight of 12 years of ruling alone. Just him, looking at her, the way he had looked at her 12 years ago before she knew to be afraid of anything. She stepped into him. His arms came around her. She pressed her face against his chest and felt his heartbeat, steady, slow, the unhurried rhythm of something that has been waiting and is no longer waiting and knows the difference. And she thought, this is it. This is the thing I ran from, and the thing I came back to, and the thing that was here the whole time. Home. She had not said it out loud yet. She said it now, into the fabric of his shirt, so quietly that only the bond carried it. She felt his arms tighten, felt him press his lips to her hair. He had heard. That night, after the ceremony and the dinner and the warmth of the pack gathering, and Emric falling asleep in the great hall over a conversation with Aldrich about Highland cartography that had apparently been too interesting to interrupt, but not quite interesting enough to prevent sleep. That night, in the quiet of the East Corridor rooms, the walls came down completely. Not the careful managed nearness of the herbalist study, not the specific restrained honesty of two people finding their way back to each other across a table, the real thing. The 12 years of it, finally given room to be what it had always been, arriving in the dark of the palace like something that had been traveling a very long way and had finally found where it was going. She was not passive in it. She had been passive about things she wanted for 12 years, and she was done with that. She chose this, completely, with full knowledge, with the specific, fierce, unambiguous wanting of a woman who has stopped negotiating with what she needs. She chose him, and he knew she was choosing, and knowing changed everything. He was not careful anymore. He was not measured. He was the man she had loved at 26, and the man he had become across 12 years of carrying something enormous alone. And in the dark, he was both of those things at once, and she held all of it and gave all of it back, and the bond was not a pull anymore. It was a fullness, complete. Finally and utterly complete. Afterward, they lay in the dark with the Highland wind moving against the window and his heartbeat under her ear, and the specific, extraordinary quiet of a room in which everything has been resolved. She was not trying to think about anything. There was nothing left that required thought. There was only this, the warmth of him, the weight of his arm across her, the bond like sunlight in her chest. "We lost 12 years. She said, not with grief, just with the honesty of naming it. "Yes," he said, "I want 12 more, and 12 after that." She felt his chest move beneath her, the low, warm sound that was his laugh when it was real rather than performed. "That," he said, "is a very achievable ambition." She smiled against his chest. Outside, the Highland wind moved through the oak trees in the palace grounds with the patient sound of things that have been in their place for a long time and intend to remain. She closed her eyes. She slept. And for the first time in 12 years, sleeping felt like something she was allowed. The morning came gray and soft through the east corridor window. She woke to the smell of tea. The specific smell of someone who has been awake before her and has decided, without being asked, that she should have it. Cassian was at the window. He had brought 2 cups. When he heard her wake, he turned and held one out, simply, without preamble, without performance. Just the gesture of someone who has noted what the person beside them needs and has acted on it. She sat up, took the cup, looked at the gray Highland morning through the east window. He came back to sit beside her. They drank their tea in the gray morning light without speaking, because neither of them needed to. The silence had a different quality from all the silences that had come before, not weighted with what was unsaid, not managing anything, simply the silence of 2 people who are where they are supposed to be. "Emric will be at training in an hour," he said eventually. "He was asleep in the great hall last time I saw him," she said. "He'll be awake." He said it with the confidence of a man who has spent 12 days learning his son and has understood that Emric does not miss training. "He's never late." "He gets that from me," she said. He looked at her sideways. "He gets everything useful from you," he said. "I am aware of this." "He gets the patience from you," she said, "and the jaw." "I'll take the jaw." She laughed. The real kind, the inside kind. He watched it with the expression he had when she laughed, the specific look of a man encountering something he had been afraid he would never get to see again, and finds, each time, that it is better than he remembered. Epilogue. 6 months later, spring. The new shop opened on the first Wednesday in April. It was on the main street of Vael town, the pack settlement that had grown up around the palace grounds across 4 generations, half a mile from the palace gates, close enough that the walk between them took 8 minutes through the Highland oak path that Rowan had claimed as her morning route. The town had a bakery, a market, a school, a post office, 3 small businesses whose owners had knocked on her door in the first month to introduce themselves with the specific warmth of a community that has been told something and has decided collectively that it approves. She had closed our Vale of Seabridge in February. She had driven down to the Oregon coast alone. Cassian had offered to come. She had said no, this was hers to do, and spent a day in the workshop, running her hands along the workbenches she had built, checking the tools she would bring and the ones she would leave. She had paid Oren's final invoice in person, and he had made her tea, and they had sat in the February cold for an hour. And when she left, he had walked her to the car and said, "Good. It was time, Ms. Vael. It was well past time." She had driven back to the Highland Territory with the boot full of tools and the workshop keys left on the bench and the sign taken down, and she had not cried until she was past the Oregon state line, and then she had cried for the right reasons, not grief, not loss, but the specific emotional release of someone who has finished one thing properly and is ready to begin the next. The new sign read, R. Vael, the real spelling. Her real name. It offered herbalist consultations, medicinal formulations, and, in the adjoining workshop space, boat and marine engine repair. Because the Pack Territory had a river and 3 fishing lakes and a surprising number of people who owned small watercraft and had been quietly in need of someone who knew what they were doing with an outboard engine. She knew what she was doing with an outboard engine. She had made herself know. The shop was busy from the first week, steady, the specific steady that comes from a community that has been waiting for a service and is glad it has arrived. She liked being in the town during working hours, liked having a space that was entirely hers, liked the specific quality of walking to work through the Highland Oak path in the morning, with the territory waking around her and the pack's energy in the air like something that recognized her. It did recognize her. She felt it every morning. The specific resonance of a pack that has formally accepted its Luna and means it, not as a political fact, but as a biological one. The pack bond extending to include her in the way that pack bonds extend when they have decided. She was part of this. She was home. Aldrich came to the shop on the 4th Wednesday. He sat in the chair across the work counter and looked around with the assessing gaze of a security professional cataloging a space, and then said, "It's good. The wards are solid. You should add a secondary layer on the east window, but the primary structure is clean." She looked at him. "Did Emric send you to check my wards?" He expressed a concern. Aldrich said carefully, "He's 12. "He is thorough," Aldrich said, with a quality in his voice she had come to understand was the maximum warmth he deployed in professional settings. He looked at her across the counter. "He is doing well. In training. Beyond well. Cassian thinks within 4 months the power management will be fully integrated. No external support required." A pause. "He asked me yesterday what I was like at 12. I told him I was considerably less impressive. He said, 'I bet you were more impressive than you think.'" Rowan looked at Aldrich, at the 15 years of loyalty in his face, the quiet steadiness of a man who had followed his alpha across every difficult thing and had, along the way, without making a fuss about it, apparently also decided to be something like a fixed point for a boy who had needed one. "Thank you," she said, "for letting him walk to the court." Aldrich was quiet for a moment. "He was right to go," he said, "and I had a man on him the whole way." "I know," she said. "Thank you for that, too." He nodded once. Then he got up and left, because Aldrich did not stay longer than required and had never in 15 years started learning to do so. On a Saturday in late April, Cassian came to the shop at closing time. He did this now. On Saturdays, when the council schedule permitted, he walked down the oak path and arrived at the end of the working day, and they walked back together through the Highland evening. It had become, without either of them formally deciding it, one of the things that belonged to them. She was locking up when he arrived. He had Emric with him. Emric in his fitted navy jacket with the mended cuff, carrying a new navigational chart he had acquired somewhere and was already reading while walking, a skill he had been developing for some time. "New chart?" she said. "River system," he said without looking up. "There are 3 tributary patterns that aren't on the standard territorial maps. I'm going to ask Aldrich if the Pack Cartography Office has better data." "He'll say yes," Cassian said. "He always says yes to you." "I know," Emric said, with the comfortable assurance of someone who has assessed a relationship accurately and is not embarrassed about the assessment. They walked back through the oak path in the April evening, the light coming through the oaks in long, warm lines, the highland air doing its particular spring thing of smelling like everything that has been waiting out the winter and has finally decided to come back. Emric walked ahead, reading his chart with the serene confidence of someone who has never tripped while reading and does not intend to start. Rowan and Cassian walked behind, close enough that their hands found each other without discussion, the way hands do when they have been finding each other long enough to have stopped requiring the decision. "How was the shop?" he asked. "Good, 3 consultations, 2 engine repairs. Aldrich came to check my wards." Emric asked him to. "I know. He's thorough. He gets that from me." He looked at her sideways with the expression he used when she said something that surprised him into honesty. "He gets everything useful from you," he said. "I remain aware of this. He gets the patience from you. We've established this. And the jaw." "And the jaw," she agreed. Ahead of them on the path, Emric stopped walking. He had reached a point where the oak trees thinned and the highland view opened up. The valley, the river, the Pack territory spread below in the April evening light, warm and enormous, and entirely recognizably home. He stood there with his chart and looked at it, looked at the view, looked back at the chart. "The river curves east here," he said, to no one in particular. "The map has it going northeast. Someone measured wrong." He folded the chart, tucked it away, looked out at the territory with the specific expression of someone who has been right about something and finds that entirely satisfactory. Then he looked back at his parents. Something moved across his face, warm and unguarded and briefly, entirely 12 years old. He looked at the 2 of them on the path, hand in hand in the April evening with the territory behind them, and the satisfied expression settled into something deeper. The specific quality of a person who has done a good thing and can see directly and without question that it was good. "Come on," he said, "I'm hungry." They came on. That evening after dinner, and Emric's ongoing cartographic corrections, and Aldrich's appearance at the door to return a book Emric had lent him, and the comfortable warmth of a household that has found its rhythm. Rowan stood at the east corridor window in the dark and looked out at the highland oak grove in the April night. The bond was warm in her chest, steady, full, entirely settled. She could feel Cassian in the next room. She could feel Emric down the corridor, the specific frequency of his power at rest, enormous and contained and completely his own. She could feel the pack, faintly, at the edges, the collective warmth of 200 people, whose Luna was finally in place and who were, in the particular way of packs that have been incomplete and are now whole, simply glad. She had spent 12 years building a life that was good, solid and real and hers, built with her own hands from the rubble of a single night. She was proud of it. It had been real and it had mattered, and the woman who had built it had been strong in ways that deserved recognition. But this was something different, not better in the way that replaces or diminishes, better in the way that addition works, larger, more complete, the thing she had been building toward without knowing what she was building toward, across 12 years of early mornings and engine oil, and the sound of the Oregon coast, and a boy with gold in his hands, growing into someone extraordinary. She had built a life, and then her son had walked through 200 yards of Highland dark in the pre-dawn, and walked into his father's court and said, "It is time. We are done pretending." And he had been right. He had been entirely, completely, devastatingly right. 12 years old, and already wiser than either of them. Cassian came to the window. He stood behind her, arms around her, chin resting on the top of her head, looking out at the Highland oak grove in the April dark. The bond was warm between them, not a pull anymore, a presence, permanent and entirely undramatic, the way permanent things are when they have finally arrived where they were going. "The shop is open," he said quietly, holding everything in those 3 words. The 12 years, the choices, the assembly, the ceremony, the lamplight herbalist study, and the gray morning tea, and every day in between. "The shop is open," she agreed. "Vael. The real spelling. The real name," he said, and pressed his lips to her hair. "Welcome home, Rowan. The real one. The one that was always here." She leaned back into him, let herself be held with the completeness of someone who has stopped negotiating with what she needs and has simply, at last, allowed herself to have it. Outside, the April oak grove moved in the Highland wind, patient, unhurried, in the same place it had always been. The territory was quiet. The pack was settled. The bond was warm. And down the corridor, in a room covered in navigational charts, a 12-year-old boy who had walked through the dark toward a destiny neither of his parents had been ready to claim yet, who had been braver than both of them and quieter about it than anyone deserved, slept deeply and without difficulty. The gold light was faint around his hands in sleep, warm, permanent, finally, completely his own. He had known, from the beginning, how this would end. He had simply been willing to begin it. This has been, she was declared dead. Her son just walked into the Alpha King's court alone. A Moonlit Romance Stories original. If this story reached inside you, if you felt Rowan's courage, Emric's conviction, and the love that 12 years could not extinguish, then you already know you are exactly where you belong. Subscribe to Moonlit Romance Stories. New complete stories every single week. No unfinished endings. No waiting. Where passion meets prophecy. We will see you next time.